It's not clear what you do about Gaza, but why should this be Israel's problem alone? Their formative years, fasting or shitting into a bucket in the middle of Columbia University, while saying they were doing it for Hamas. Well done, guys. Terms between Riyadh and Berkeley, and if we can find that civilizational G-spot, let's do it.
London is boiling over with tension, pro-Palestine protests, rising voices, and now Douglas Murray has spoken out. But what's really behind his words? Is it just political commentary, or something deeper, a fear growing within him? We're diving headfirst into his biggest fear, and why it has him on edge as the clash between Londoners and pro-Palestine supporters intensifies. Stay tuned to uncover the raw truth that the media isn't talking about. Don't forget to subscribe and hit the bell, so you're always in the loop and never miss an update.
It's possible once again to see what the Middle East could look like if these two delusions fell away. If instead of everyone obsessing about the Palestinians getting another state, they thought about improving the living conditions of the Palestinians. If instead of talking about the importance of bringing Iran in from the cold, the mullahs in from the cold, we talked about if Washington had spent 1% of the time it has spent trying to get Benjamin Netanyahu out of power in Jerusalem, trying to get the mullahs out of power in Tehran, the mullahs would be out of power in Tehran by now. Every American government for 30 years has been trying to get Benjamin Netanyahu out of office. Bill Clinton sent teams of people over to get Netanyahu to lose the election in the 90s. When Netanyahu says in his memoirs, Bill Clinton calls him up to congratulate him after he wins the prime ministership, gets together the coalition, and Bill Clinton says, well, we did everything we could to keep you out, but we're looking forward to working with you. Okay, but
Douglas Murray doesn't hold back in his criticism of current Middle East policies. He argues that the real problem isn't just the endless debate about creating another Palestinian state, it's the failure to focus on improving the daily lives of Palestinians. He also takes a hard line on U.S. involvement in the region, particularly when it comes to Israel. Murray points out that for decades, American governments have poured efforts into trying to oust Benjamin Netanyahu while missing opportunities to weaken Iran's regime. According to him, if the U.S. had put even a fraction of that energy into removing Iran's mullahs, they might already be out of power. His take calls out what he sees as misplaced priorities, sparking a conversation about how to approach peace and stability in the Middle East more effectively. It's a bold stance, sure to stir debate on whether these strategies are truly helping or holding the region back.
But the point it has been American government policy to change the prime minister in Israel. Whatever you think of him, he's the one who can put together coalitions. What have they done when the Iranian people took to the streets like in 2009? Nothing. So if you didn't have that terror regime oppressing the people of Iran and spreading their terror around the region, look at what's possible. Look at what Bahrain has achieved in recent years. Look at what Saudi has been able to achieve in recent years. There are developments in Saudi Arabia I never thought would be seen in generations in terms of liberalization. Now, does it yet look like Berkeley? No, thank God. And I always like to think there might be somewhere in liberal terms between Riyadh and Berkeley, and if we can find that civilizational G-spot, let's do it.
Douglas draws a sharp contrast between U.S. actions in Israel and Iran, questioning the American government's focus. For years, Washington has made efforts to unseat Benjamin Netanyahu, while largely turning a blind eye to moments when real change could have been supported in Iran, such as during the 2009 protests. Murray argues that if the same energy used against Netanyahu had been applied to opposing Iran's regime, it might not still be in power today. He also points to Saudi Arabia as an example of what's possible when a country embraces reform. In recent years, Saudi has made strides in liberalization that Murray admits he never thought he'd see in his lifetime. While it's far from a liberal society, there's hope for finding a balance, somewhere between Riyadh and places like Berkeley.
It does not involve the mullahs in Tehran having power, and it is not predicated on Mahmoud Abbas or the PA or whatever comes next in Gaza creating the perfect Palestinian state. The region cannot wait for that. It has waited for that for decades, and the Palestinian leadership has never been serious about it. It never wanted it. It walked away like it walked away in 1947, 1948. And again, I mean, I'm a little hard line on this at this point, but I believe that if you have kept being offered a state and you have kept waging war, you do not continue to have the right to keep on being handed state after state after state. If the Palestinians want another state, they should earn it, as everybody else has, as Israel did. But by the way, what I just said is so far out of the Overton window in Washington still, where it's like, let's give them more states.
Here, a strong viewpoint on the ongoing issue of Palestinian statehood is presented, which expresses frustration with what he sees as repeated missed opportunities by Palestinian leadership. He references historical moments, such as 1947 and 1948, when statehood was offered, only to be rejected in favor of continued conflict. In Murray's view, the region has waited long enough for Palestinian leaders to engage seriously in building a state, and he questions whether they should continue to be offered such opportunities without significant efforts toward peace. Murray also contrasts this with Israel's own journey to statehood, suggesting that it was earned through perseverance. He acknowledges that this perspective may not align with the mainstream discussions in Washington, where policies often focus on providing pathways to statehood.
But what do you do if you're Israel? In other words, I don't disagree with the idea that if the Palestinians of the West Bank were given a state tomorrow, that would likely turn toward Hamas, and then
at best it'll be another failed Arab state, and most likely it'll just be another Iranian proxy state. So well done, all you kids on campus who thought that everything in the world would unfurl into peace if another rotten state was created in the Middle East.
But then occupation forever?
No.
Then what?
That's for the Israeli government to work out, among others. And by the way, you know, one of the things about the Palestinian question, to my mind, is that just take Gaza for the time being. It's very hard to know what you do with Gaza now. I don't think the Israelis should reoccupy it. I'm very nervous about the fact that there will almost certainly have to be IDF at the Philadelphia corridor, because you can't.
He expresses concerns about the potential consequences of establishing a Palestinian state in the West Bank. He suggests that, if created, it could come under the control of Hamas or even become a proxy state for Iran. Murray questions whether this would truly lead to peace in the region, cautioning that it could result in yet another struggling Arab state. He critiques the idea, popular among some, that statehood for Palestinians would automatically resolve long-standing conflicts, noting that the reality might be more complicated. Regarding Gaza, Murray acknowledges the difficult choices ahead. He is unsure about the prospect of Israel reoccupying Gaza and expresses concerns about the potential need for Israeli forces to be stationed at key locations, such as the Philadelphia corridor, to ensure security.
My colleague and friend Natasha Hausdorff was down at the Philadelphia corridor the other week, which is the strip between Gaza and Egypt, a piece of land that most Western journalists seem to not know exists. But anyway, I'm nervous about the fact that IDF will have to be at the Philadelphia corridor, but they have to be because, as Natasha showed me the photographs the other day, these huge tunnels, and as big as any of the tunnels I've seen in Gaza in the last year, are for military-sized vehicles to drive through, driving rockets and ammunition into Gaza, and they're all under Egyptian army checkpoints. So obviously the Egyptians can't be trusted with that, from stopping them getting in. So yes, there will have to be Israeli troops at the Philadelphia corridor. I'm very nervous about it, however, because I think that we will hear for many years of young men and women in the IDF patrolling that and getting shot or kidnapped by terrorists in Gaza.
the importance of the Philadelphia corridor, the narrow strip of land between Gaza and Egypt, which is often overlooked in discussions about the region. Douglas raises concerns about the presence of Israeli Defense Forces, IDF, in this area, emphasizing the discovery of extensive tunnels that facilitate the movement of military vehicles and supplies into Gaza. These tunnels, he notes, run beneath Egyptian army checkpoints, leading to questions about Egypt's capability to prevent smuggling. While acknowledging the necessity of having Israeli troops in the corridor for security purposes, Murray expresses apprehension about the potential consequences of their deployment. He warns that such a presence could result in ongoing violence, with IDF personnel facing risks of attacks or kidnappings from groups in Gaza.
Something has to be done for the people of Gaza, with the people of Gaza. I think they should hopefully have learned by now that there is a terrible price to pay for voting for a terrorist group to run you. And if something can be done, among other things, that you don't have groups like UNRWA teaching young Gazan kids. They had 18 years to run the Gaza, and they brought up a generation of sociopaths. They brought them up with math books that, like, if you kill 2 Jews and then kill 2 more Jews, how many dead Jews have you got? That's like math in Gaza. I mean, this is sick, and we've known about it for years, and it was tolerated for years by the Americans and all the other Westerners as we poured money into these corrupt organizations. But it's not clear what you do about Gaza. But why should this be Israel's problem alone? If Washington doesn't have an answer for Gaza, and Egypt doesn't, and they don't want it back, and the rest of the world does, why would people keep on saying it's Israel's problem alone to solve? Whatever happens in Gaza should be a regional agreement with regional investment, regional security deals, but the absolute bottom line is never again will young Israelis have to lose their lives going in to fight another conflict to get Iranian rockets that have come through Egypt out of Gaza. This should be the last round. I said this at the beginning of this war. Will this be the umpteenth Gaza war or the last one? Will this be the 3rd Lebanon war or the last one? My hope is this is the last Gaza war, this is the last Lebanon war.
Douglas stresses the need for action regarding Gaza, highlighting that the local population must understand the consequences of electing a terrorist group to lead them. He criticizes the educational content in Gaza, which he believes has contributed to a troubling mindset among the youth, citing disturbing examples of violence normalization. He questions why the responsibility for addressing Gaza's issues should fall solely on Israel when there are no clear solutions from the US or Egypt. He advocates for a regional approach to resolving the conflict, emphasizing that any future resolution should ensure Israeli safety and prevent further loss of life. Reflecting on the events of October 2023, he notes both the violence from Hamas and the reactions from various groups in the West, indicating a complex and challenging situation. He also references Ta-Nehisi Coates' new book, observing that it shifts focus but remains centered on personal narratives.
I suppose some of these people have got fed up of sending wreaths by now. Maybe they should have loyalty cards with Interflora. Send flowers to all of the people they worshipped who are no more. Their horrible belief is going the way that anti-Semitic death cults have gone throughout history. There is a reason why people abhor the Nazis. They were the same type of people, and they were ground into the dust of history. Hamas, Hezbollah, the mullahs will go as well. And these young people who decided to spend their formative years fasting or shitting into a bucket in the middle of Columbia University while saying they were doing it for Hamas, well done, guys. Well done. Your movement was less fragrant than it seemed.
Those people who are shouting Intifada are not thinking of the people murdered in the Hebrew U cafeteria. They're thinking I was told this is what it means to be on the right side of history.
Yeah, exactly. And
that's what
they were told they were on the right side of history as they were chasing Jews across campus shouting, "Go back to Poland." Do you think you might have been the bad guys?
Douglas discusses the increasing frustration among some individuals regarding the act of sending condolences in response to violence, suggesting that these gestures can become trivialized over time. He compares the ideologies of certain extremist groups today to historical anti-Semitic movements, asserting that organizations like Hamas and Hezbollah will eventually face repercussions similar to those endured by the Nazis. He also critiques the actions of young protesters who express support for Hamas, arguing that their efforts often lack meaningful understanding. He questions whether these individuals reflect on the consequences of their statements, especially concerning the Jewish community. Furthermore, he highlights concerning statistics that reveal a significant portion of Americans hold troubling views, pointing to a larger issue surrounding anti-Semitism in contemporary discourse. In this video, Douglas Murray raises critical issues surrounding the Middle East conflict, particularly the Israeli-Palestinian dynamics. He critiques U.S. policies for prioritizing the ousting of Israeli leadership, while overlooking opportunities to confront Iran's influence and address the situation in Gaza. Murray advocates for a regional strategy to tackle Gaza's challenges, questioning the viability of Palestinian statehood given past rejections, and the potential for further conflict. He also highlights concerning trends in anti-Semitism, and calls for greater accountability from the Gaza population, emphasizing the need for a deeper understanding of the complexities at play as tensions escalate in London and beyond.